Testing, testing.
Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started as it's 9 o'clock. My name is Blake Lyon. I'm serving as the chair. This is the Development Review Committee meeting for Pinellas County. It is Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Let me give you a few open comments this morning before we get started, and then we'll go right into our single item on the agenda today, which is for the Restoration Bay application. Just as a way of reminder, we have, thank you all for coming and participating, and for those that are at home and taking advantage of our live streaming, we appreciate your accommodations and considerations for helping us maintain social distancing. This morning what we'll do is we'll go through, I'll make a few introductory comments, then we'll open up the item for the applicant to make their comment and present their project as they have it. And then during the course of that presentation, we may have clarifying questions or comments from staff as a follow-on, and then we'll have some time for Mr. Gearing to present his comments, and then again follow with staff questions and comments. And at the conclusion, we'll have some closing remarks just to kind of let you know what our next steps are moving this way forward. For those of you that are sitting at the table, I'll just inform you that the mics, you have to push the small button in the middle and it'll light up green to let you know that the microphone is on. They are very sensitive, so if you are having any sidebar comments, please make sure to turn your mic off so we avoid any confusion in terms of being able to hear the comments that are being made. And then those that are presenting this morning, you're welcome to present at the table if you so choose, or you're welcome to step up here to the individual lectern. We have several different screens in the room, and so any materials that you intend to put up will be displayed there virtually. So with that, if there are no questions at the start, what I will do is then turn it over to Mr. Joel Tu, and we will hear from our applicants. Mr. Tu.
Thank you, Blake. Can everyone hear me okay? My name is Joel Tu. I'm a land use attorney here in Pinellas County. I've been practicing here, I hate to admit it, going on 42 years now, exclusively in the land use and entitlement arena for the last 30 of those 42 years. I represent the property owner, which also is the applicant for the project known as Restoration Bay. And just by way of brief background, we of course submitted our initial application for the plan amendment for the future land use designation change to residential low back in 2019. We ultimately had the first Development Review Committee meeting with you, I think later that year or in early 2020. And then we received the initial staff report with comments and recommendation later in 2020. The applicant reviewed those comments and that report and elected to compile a supplemental submittal, which we resubmitted in November of 2020, this past year, to address the specific comments, concerns, questions, or objections that were raised in your prior report. So we're here today for two things. Number one is to summarize, discuss, answer any questions related to the most recent resubmittal. But at the same time, since it has been quite a while now, going on a year and a half since we started the process, we are going to also provide an overall summary and review of the proposal, including the items that were set forth in the first submittal. For the record, I made it clear on the resubmittal that we still maintain as part of the record our initial submittal. We reincorporate that submittal into this presentation, and we deemed the second submittal to be a supplement to that first submittal. I have a few very preliminary comments on two of the points raised in the most recent staff report. I'm going to address those. They're basically comp plan policy issues or arguments that were made in the staff report that I would like to address. Then I'm going to turn this over to the other consultants. We have someone from each discipline that's involved in the application and the subjects of the application. Each one will then briefly summarize and address their discipline, and then I will make some concluding comments and remarks. Any and all of us are available for question at any time, either during the presentation or at the end. We're happy to answer any questions and provide any additional help or information we can provide. So if I may commence, the 2 points I wish to discuss from the report, the last staff report, are the first 2 comments that were made in that report. The first dealt with the coastal management element of your comprehensive plan, and basically the report took the position that there should not be any development in the coastal storm area, as that term is defined in Objective 1.3 of your comprehensive plan. And as I'm sure you're aware, that's a very defined term, coastal storm area. Our main point, which we put in the submittal, which I submit is very clear on your comprehensive plan, is that with all respect, the analysis in the prior report is simply incorrect. Policy 1.3.5 is determinative, in my opinion, of this comprehensive plan application as to the question of whether you may have a residential development of this nature within the, quote, coastal storm area. And what your policy 1.3.5 in your comprehensive plan clearly states is that single-family residential development that is less than 5 units per acre of density is allowed in the, quote, coastal storm area. That policy precludes or discourages residential development in the coastal storm area that is greater than 5 units per acre. We have applied for only 60% of that allowable 5 units per acre under your comprehensive plan. We've applied for a density that equates to 3 dwelling units per acre. So I'm at a little bit of a loss, to be honest with you, after 42 years of doing this and applying your comprehensive plans and other comprehensive plans, as to how anyone could read policy 1.3.5 and come to the conclusion stated in the first comment of the prior report that your comprehensive plan prohibits this residential development. If the county had intended to prohibit all single-family residential development in the coastal storm area, the county certainly knew how to write the number 0 units per acre rather than 5 units per acre. And in making the clearly conscious decision and the board approving a policy that stated that you could have residential density up to 5 units per acre in the coastal storm area is simply determinative as a legal matter. Now, perhaps staff is prepared to ride that pony to the finish line. I'm quite confident that any independent judicial officer reviewing that policy and reviewing your comment number 1 will respectfully disagree with that conclusion because it is very clear. And to back up my reading of 1.3.5, which I don't think is debatable, but to back that up, also take a look at your policy 1.3.11 in the same coastal management element. Your policy 1.3.11 again acknowledges that the coastal storm area allows residential development, and it then goes on to actually direct the county. It directs you that in applying policy 1.3.1 in the coastal storm area, that the county can only require the residential developer to provide such hurricane mitigation, specifically hurricane shelter mitigation, as is reasonably attributable to the impact of the development itself. In other words, you can't require them to mitigate for 500 units if they're only developing 273 units. Why would you have a policy that even directed you the mechanics and the quantity to do hurricane shelter mitigation for residential development in the coastal storm area if residential development was not allowed in the coastal storm area. You would not have had any reason to put in policy 1.3.11 if you did not contemplate residential development. Furthermore, the same policy, 1.3.11, then goes on to state that with regard to the appropriate level of hurricane shelter mitigation for a residential development in the coastal storm area, that the county is obligated to negotiate in good faith with the developer to enter into a development agreement which memorializes that mitigation plan. Well, I respectfully submit that this county has declined and failed to negotiate in good faith on a development agreement to memorialize that. We've repeatedly asked to engage in that process. We were told originally, even before we submitted this application, that there would be give and take, there would be a bilateral process, and that we would work on those types of issues. So I again assert that the county is acting in bad faith in declining to negotiate the specific terms of our development agreement, which I have now submitted twice, to arrive at what we mutually agree is reasonable mitigation attributed to our proposed development for hurricane shelters. Goal 3 of your coastal managed element obligates Pinellas County to provide adequate public facilities to serve development and redevelopment proposed for the unincorporated coastal planning area. I'm going to say that again. Goal 3 of your own comprehensive plan obligates the county to provide adequate public facilities to serve development and redevelopment proposed for the unincorporated coastal planning area. Well, pray tell, if you didn't contemplate having development in the coastal planning area, and if you did not contemplate having residential development in the coastal storm area, why would you have obligated yourselves to provide the public infrastructure to support that development and redevelopment? Finally, Goal 4 of your coastal management element in your own comprehensive plan lists 32 specific implementation policies for the coastal storm area. Do you know how many of those 32 specific implementation policies restrict or prohibit residential density less than 5 units per acre? The answer, of course, is 0. Please read those 32 specific implementation policies. When you wanted to prohibit or restrict a certain type of development in the coastal storm area, you knew how to state that in those 32 specific implementation policies. You won't find such policy to restrict or prohibit a project such as ours that is proposing single-family residential development of less than 5 units per acre. That's my response to your comment number 1 in your report. And I hope you will reconsider that. You will actually read your comprehensive plan and understand why, when I got that report and I called Mr. Lyon and Mr. Sadowski, why I was so upset with the content of that report. Because after 42 years of doing this and always respecting Pinellas County staff as professional, intellectually honest, and able to read their own comprehensive plan, I frankly was disappointed, because I don't feel like the job was done fairly and objectively. I'll get to that point in my concluding remarks. Secondly, as to your comment number 2, my response is much more brief. The staff report actually concedes, and I quote, that the proposed residential low future land use designation is consistent with the surrounding area. So there's actually a factual and professional finding in your own report that our proposed residential low designation is consistent with the surrounding area. Well, obviously that's a correct conclusion because all you have to do is look at Google Earth or any map of the surrounding residential subdivisions. And also, which you are aware, that this property was even platted originally to be an identical subdivision that had the same density, the same lot sizes, the same street stubbed out to interconnect with this subdivision. So of course it's consistent. That's not the problem I have with your comment number 2, because obviously I agree with that point. The problem I have is in the same comment, practically the same sentence, there is then a statement in your report that says that despite being consistent with the surrounding area, it is, quote, only appropriate if preservation and/or recreation open space are not feasible, close quote. I'm going to read that again. Only appropriate, even though consistent, only appropriate if preservation and/or recreation open space are not feasible. Now, I have read your comprehensive plan several times, again, since getting your report. I do not find that policy in your comprehensive plan. And I challenge you to go find that policy in your comprehensive plan, which you have stated as a matter of fact and a matter of law in your report. Because again, I believe an independent judicial officer is not going to find that policy in your comprehensive plan. In fact, as I just pointed out under comment number 1, you have policy 1.3.5, which absolutely contradicts your statement, because policy 1.3.5 flatly says that it's appropriate to have single-family residential development of less than 5 units an acre in the coastal storm area. So those are my thoughts on the first 2 elements. I'm going to turn this over now to Mr. Lohmiller, who is our planning consultant, and he will address the planning points and our resubmittal.
Thank you, Joel. My name is Clark Lohmiller. I'm with Ardura, 4921 Memorial Highway, Tampa, Florida, 33634. And again, like Joel mentioned, I'm the planner and designer of the project itself. So I'll specifically address staff comment number 3 and kind of where we started in the original submittal and to where we are today. So staff's comment to our original submittal was that the zoning district requires that a district master plan be creative, walkable, and context-sensitive community that responds to the surrounding land use pattern and preserves unique natural features. Therefore, the development master plan should seek to set aside more vulnerable areas of the site for preservation, open space uses. The current design does not achieve this, nor does it evaluate and compensate for the impacts of the future sea level rise. Okay, so that was the initial, the comment response. In our initial submittal, I would argue that if you look at the surrounding neighbors that staff has already deemed we are consistent with in their own report, that those existing developments are far less creative than this development. Not only that, we've provided public accessibility, a nature trail, connectivity around the perimeter to Millennium Park, which none of the other developments do. You actually have to walk in the right-of-way or street that don't have sidewalks to get to Millennium Park or drive to. This property allows for the opportunity for surrounding neighbors to walk through the development in a safe, walkable manner to get to Millennium Park. Not only to get to Millennium Park, but also access to water if they want to go down to see water features that some folks live internal and don't have the opportunity to access the water. So in that regard, it is very much, in my opinion, more creative and does meet the minimal requirements of an RPD zoning district plan. After the response, we took into consideration what staff said. We listened. And one of the things, we did a couple of things. We restricted the lot sizes for the evacuation zone to be a larger lot size. And what that'll help do is reduce the density in the lower or more the lower evacuation zones, the category 1 evacuation, or level 1, 2, 3, 4 evacuation zones. So the lot sizes will be larger. It will also help in the constructability to meet the Florida Building Code requirements for building homes in those VE or LIMWA areas, which Nicole will talk a little bit more about. We've also added additional connectivity around the perimeter and more trail systems to allow for more public access, to get to the waterfront, to allow for more green space, more open space, more aesthetic opportunities, so the surrounding neighbors are not looking straight in the backyards of some people's homes. We're also still providing the opportunity to save the mangroves and preserve those, which are the only preservation areas or sensitive areas on the site. We're proposing to preserve those in their existing fashion and enhance them in other locations where that opportunity is available. So in conclusion, my response to staff comment number 3 is that I just don't know where it's coming from a planner and an experienced planner of over 15 years. This project is something that Pinellas County should really be proud of. This is what you should request your applicants to come in and propose. Walkability, safety, design characteristics that are creative, preservation of open space, preservation of existing natural features. This is what your code says, and I think we've done that to the fullest extent, and it should absolutely be supportable. I will now turn it over to Nicole Lynn to talk a little bit more about the constructability, the engineering side of this. And for that, there you go, Nicole.
Thank you. I'm Nicole Lynn. I'm also with Ardura. I've been a civil engineer licensed in the state of Florida, practicing for 16 years. I do work throughout the Tampa Bay area and have done work in Pinellas County, familiar with the codes and standards. So to talk a little bit about the civil engineering and environmental aspects of the project, as to give this overview, I want to start out with just from a very big picture. The land lies from an elevation. It runs from the north to south, drains down to Boca Ciega Bay. The existing ground cover, as we know, has a lot of mangroves along the waterfront edge. It extends towards the western side of the property over towards Millennium Park, and has turf grasses that extend basically all the way up to that mangrove area and the park area. Along the north side of the site, there is a stormwater conveyance system that runs through the property that I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And then also along the eastern edge of the property, there's some residential uses. This also has a stormwater connectivity from that side of the property. So looking at the existing stormwater facilities that are out there, the project has about 180-acre watershed that runs through it. The project is proposing to accommodate existing deficiencies that exist in that adjoining watershed, sufficient deficiencies. The upgrade of the on-site retention system that is there will be substantial and will accommodate both the stormwater as it runs through the property for that adjacent watershed, as well as the stormwater treatment associated with the proposed project itself to meet current standards, which it currently does not. The property, as part of a golf course, as you all know, especially one from the 70s, it really does not, it's part of a significant factor for nutrient loading criteria that the county is well aware of, the standards that have to be put in place to meet current requirements and to really fight what has been ongoing as historical flow coming off of such projects as these. to enhance the property area. So from a stormwater standpoint, I do want to say that I reiterate that the Bogosiega Bay really is a largely untreated condition currently. And this is a huge opportunity for Pinellas County to make a huge contribution to the area and make a large improvement to the stormwater quality treatment. From a natural habitat standpoint, the nuisance vegetation that exists throughout the property is extensive. Like I mentioned a moment ago, the turf grasses go, all the way down to the waterfront, down to the mangrove areas. There's an existing golf cart path that is contributing to non-flushing of the areas in the mangrove area that we're proposing to remove and restore that ability, that natural ability that was existing before the golf course. The upland buffer areas adjacent to those wetland areas and adjacent to the Millennium Park with regard to a 50-foot area associated with a fire break is going to utilize some bioswales and remove those nuisance species that exist currently to greatly enhance the property and to effectively help with the stormwater treatment itself. Landscaping that's proposed is intended to be, of course, Florida-friendly landscaping following principles as outlined as Florida Yards and Neighborhoods Handbook. Even those areas within the residential lots themselves are intended to identify that only native indigenous trees and shrubs will be utilized in that landscaping. The park itself, that buffer that I mentioned, that 50-foot area that's proposed, is to establish not only that fire break, but for a separation, as Clark mentioned, from the residential use to the park. The wildlife, when we look at the stormwater facilities that are proposed to enhance that treatment system for the existing watershed and the stormwater system that'll be part of the project itself for the new development, is going to provide for actually wildlife, to come to the property and to utilize it. The state of the property after the project is constructed would also allow for pedestrian use. So the proposal of the project includes park area along the north and along the eastern edges, establishing that connectivity over to Millennium Park that currently doesn't exist, in giving those additional features of that stormwater conveyance that runs through the property right now. The stormwater system, I'm going to harp on that a little bit more, is proposed to utilize new types of systems and existing systems that have been around for quite some time to establish that water treatment capability. So whether it be through wet pond criteria or new uplift elements, there's a learning element to not only the stormwater system itself, but also the new park area where that native wildlife would be able to congregate. FEMA is a part, so rolling into, from a stormwater element to flood, we're aware of the new FEMA maps that have come out, that have been established. We're proposing to obviously meet the criteria of those new zones for velocity zones and AE zones with a design of the structures on the project. The utilities that are proposed to go in would serve the project. Pinellas County would be providing for the water and wastewater services. There would be an on-site lift station. The reclaim would be a big part to establish the reuse for the property. And electric and communication services would be extended into that neighborhood as well. I think I've touched on all the criteria that the county's already reviewed as part of this plan, and I want to thank you for your time and understanding of all the different elements that go into designing such a project as this that would greatly benefit this neighborhood. Steve?
Good morning. Steve Henry with Links & Associates. I am the traffic consultant on the project. I am a registered engineer in the state of Florida with over 35 years of experience. We conducted the traffic analysis for the project. We did it based on two different scenarios, looking at just the access to 66th, and then also looking at the access to 66th and Irving. Looked at both of those. The results of the analysis demonstrate that the adjacent intersections will operate at acceptable level of service. I really want to address the staff comment number 4. And I'll read it. It says, while projected roadway intersections level of service are satisfactory, the proposed density of the project may alter the roadway classification of 66th Avenue North and create traffic management conflicts that have not been mitigated by the applicant. One is the classification of 66th Avenue. To my knowledge, there is no specific criteria for that. If staff's willing to provide us with that, we can certainly look at that and see what mitigation. The reality is what is on 66th Street today is not only single family, but you've also got a church and you've got a school that accesses the roadway. So it is not, we are a single family, just like what is accessing that road. But in addition to that, you've already got a school and a church that access that road. So again, if there's some criteria that we need to look at, we're happy to work with staff on that. Same thing with the traffic management conflicts. We're not aware of those. We've shown that the intersections operate at acceptable level of service. But if there's criteria that we need to look at, again, the applicant is willing to look at that, willing to work with the county on what other mitigation options there may be available to help mitigate the project. In addition, the condition says that the application does not consider unmet area needs for multimodal improvements in the area, incomplete sidewalks and trails. Again, part of the development agreement that has been submitted, we are proposing and have proposed to provide where the sidewalk does not exist on 66th Street, to the extent that there is existing right-of-way, to provide that continuous sidewalk there. In addition to that, we're providing the access to the trail on the property today that is not available today with the golf course. So from a transportation standpoint, we believe that we have provided the mitigation for the unmet demand. But again, we're willing to work with staff if there are additional improvements or mitigation that have not been addressed. In addition to that, what we also proposed is improvements to the intersection of 66th Street and 113th. The current northbound left turn lane at that intersection does not meet the standards to accommodate the project or the traffic that is there today. The developer has committed to extending that turn lane, if the county is willing to work with us on that, to extend it to provide the length not only to accommodate the existing traffic, but also to accommodate the addition of the project traffic. And same thing at the intersection of 62nd and 113th. If we go with the two access option, that turn lane also is not adequate to accommodate the peak season traffic. But we're willing to extend that turn lane to accommodate both the peak season traffic and our traffic. That concludes my presentation, unless you've got any questions. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Schnapps-Tyler. I'm an environmental attorney with the law firm of Cobb Cole in Daytona Beach, 149 South Ridgewood Avenue. I'm an environmental attorney with 12 years of experience, primarily in the redevelopment of brownfield sites throughout the state of Florida, and here to speak briefly today about the brownfield area application that's been filed. And while the application isn't part of the DRC comments that have been received, we do believe it's a critical component of the overall proposed redevelopment of the property, specifically in that it shows the commitment on behalf of the applicant to redevelop the site in a manner that is protective of human health and the environment. And then, so for those of you that don't have much background on the Brownfields program, it is Florida's second largest cleanup program in the state behind the petroleum program in terms of dollars spent each year. And what it does is it helps facilitate redevelopment of properties with actual or perceived environmental issues. That process starts in Florida by having a local government designate a brownfield area by passing a resolution. And that resolution merely sends a message to the state and to DEP that the property is eligible to move into the program and that the local government would like to target use of the brownfield program on that specific property. That's exactly what our application that's been filed on the brownfield area proposes. And that's something that's been done before numerous times in Pinellas County, and it's been done on golf courses a number of times throughout the state. After the brownfield area is designated, a party enters into the brownfield program by signing what's called a Brownfield Site Rehabilitation Agreement, or BSRA. That's a voluntary agreement, but it provides the regulatory framework for how a cleanup or redevelopment will move forward. And that framework generally follows a process that's set forth in a section of the Florida Administrative Code that has 4 critical steps. You identify the extent of the environmental issues on the property by completing sampling of soil and groundwater and surface water. You develop a plan for cleanup or a plan to address those environmental issues. You implement that specific plan, and then you complete required post-remedial monitoring of the site. And every step of the way involves reporting to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, which oversees all of the brownfield redevelopments within Pinellas County. That regulatory framework is really important in the context of golf course redevelopment, because from a technical standpoint, golf courses are sites that are similar to agricultural areas, meaning the use of certain chemicals and pesticides and fertilizers were allowed and permitted to be applied there, which is specifically different from most other sites that fall under Florida's framework where a spill or a release has occurred, like a leaking underground storage tank or a manufacturing facility that has a spill. And so without the brownfield program in place, there is a risk that sites can be redeveloped without following that appropriate framework and not having a site that has been cleaned up to the state standards. So as noted in our application, the brownfield program has been utilized to redevelop golf courses throughout the state, including within Pinellas County, as currently is proposed with the Bay Point Golf Course. As some of you may know, earlier this year, the county designated the Bay Point Golf Course as a brownfield area to support redevelopment of the county's proposed stormwater and park project. And Mr. Carpenter, who's going to follow me next, was one of the catalysts for helping support that project and moving that project forward. As some of you may know, he provided the due diligence and initial investigation work that was provided to the county on the environmental side of things. Provided that all to staff at the request. I believe it was about $50,000 worth of due diligence work there. I do want to note that Mr. Carpenter never proposed to develop any commercial or residential redevelopment on that property, as it was well understood that the density on that golf course had been transferred to another site, and so it couldn't be redeveloped. I understand that he coordinated meetings with county staff and the owner, which resulted in him giving up the contract to acquire the property and allowed the county to move forward with their project. And he also facilitated a lot of the discussion of the brownfield program and reuse for a stormwater facility and park, which again is part of the county's proposed plan for that site. And is in a way similar to some of the other features that were talked about earlier about this project in terms of improving the stormwater, providing open space and recreational areas on the property. And so our feeling is the precedent has been set with respect to the use of the brownfield program for redevelopment of golf courses in Pinellas County. And our request is that we simply be allowed to utilize that program in the same manner that the county has been able to do so for Bay Point. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ron Carpenter, and I am the applicant and owner of Restoration Bay. You have heard from my planner, engineer, traffic engineer, environmental engineer, brownfield attorney, and land use attorney. Each has addressed the points within their area of expertise. As you have heard, many of the points in the staff report were not correct. but the biggest head scratcher was in regards to comment number 2. Comment number 2 is regarding the applicant not demonstrating that an open space recreation use is not feasible. Although I must stress that I have no legal burden of proof to show that a continued open space recreation use is not feasible, it is easy for me to demonstrate that the Tides Golf Course was not a viable business, and I will do so. But before that, I need to provide some background history. I acquired the property on November 16th, 2016. I have financial records of the course from the bank, which in this case was the seller. The bank, along with the golf course management company, provided me with the prior 5-year financials for the business. From the financial information provided by the seller, the golf course management company, and our internal bookkeeping, we prepared 2 exhibits. Exhibit 1 shows the total revenue and number of rounds played per year. Exhibit 2 illustrates the net income, or should I say losses, per year. Starting with Exhibit 1, revenue declined 42% from $1.6 million in 2012 to $957,000 in 2018. In regards to Exhibit 2, in the first full year I owned the property, we lost $200,000. But wait, this was the best year of the 7-year period. In 2018, we lost more than $400,000. This wasn't even the worst year in this 7-year period. This empirical data clearly demonstrates that a golf course and open space recreation is not a viable business at this location. Save the Tides has made public claims that I, Ron Carpenter, ran the golf course business into the ground intentionally. This cannot be further than the truth. Shortly after acquiring the property, we bought 80 new golf carts, made numerous capital improvements, increased the marketing budget, added a Sunday brunch, tried live music, happy hours, and much, much more. When we raised the average green fees from $23 to $25, there was a consumer uproar. Look, I'm a businessman, and I promise you I don't intentionally try to lose money, especially to the tune of $600,000+ in 2 years. Again, I strongly feel this alleged burden of proof is completely unfair. But I want to make a good faith effort to address all of staff's comments and concerns. But on the flip side of things, if staff is going to look at the viability of the golf course, in all fairness to me, as the applicant, staff should evaluate the financial viability and benefits of my proposed development. Our current property taxes are $53,000 per year. What would be the property taxes per year of 273 single-family homes with an average value of $1 million? I'll answer that question for you. It's over $4 million a year. Please take the time to calculate the amount of impact fees collected on the construction of 273 single-family homes. I'll save you the time. I already did it. The answer is over $5 million. Most importantly, during this pandemic, there are a lot of people out of work. The home building business has been deemed an essential business. Some of you may know that along with being a land developer, I own Carpenter Homes. We performed an analysis to see how many people are employed to build just one home. The answer may shock you. It is 320 people. This number doesn't even include the back office support for Carpenter Homes. I once heard a county commissioner state on the record that the public hearings for my applications should be held at Tropicana Field. Perhaps this was a joke, but what isn't a joke is if all the people that could be potentially employed by our development did show up at the public hearings, we would need to have these hearings at the Trop. This is not a laughing matter, but a harsh reality. I would like to make one last comment. As I walked in this morning, I saw the familiar green t-shirts that read, "Save the Tides." Save the tides. Let me make this very, very, very clear. The Tides Golf Course is gone. And I guarantee you, there will never be another golf course on my property. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lyon, I just have a very few concluding comments, and we'll be wrapped up on our presentation and happy to take questions. I want to go back. I think that our consultants and Mr. Carpenter have responded fairly in detail to the staff report and the matters set forth in our resubmittal package. But before we lose sight of it, I want to try to go back to the original application and the key basic points that we made in that, most of which relate to the basic entitlement rights which we believe exist with respect to this property, and also the public benefits which Nicole Lynn and Clark Lohmiller outlined for you. As to the basic entitlements, please remember that this property was originally approved by the county for residential development, specifically for 273 residential homes in a platted subdivision, which, as I stated earlier, looks exactly like the surrounding subdivisions and was intended originally to be a continuation of those subdivisions. So, unlike, as was referenced on the Brownfield discussion earlier, unlike Bay Point, unlike Wentworth Golf Club, where I used to live and the project that I did, unlike most golf course communities in this county, where for those golf course communities, typically, the developer came in, stripped off and transferred the density from the golf course land to justify the density approved in the surrounding neighborhood to get the density under your comp plan. That never happened at the Tides. So please, if you're thinking that this is another one of those where the density was transferred and this is another density grab, that is just factually and historically incorrect. This land was originally approved for residential, platted way before there was a golf course. In fact, it still had its residential zoning and its plat in place when the property owner decided to use it as a golf course use. We submit on an interim basis because the way the county approved that was as a conditional use. The county didn't change the zoning. The county left the R2 zoning. The county left the residential plat. It simply allowed the interim golf course use as a conditional use. And it operated that way for many years. The county then decided that it was going to start applying these recreational open space overlays, not a plan redesignation, not a rezoning, simply a comprehensive plan overlay that was intended at the time, and I was here practicing when this was done, it was intended to update your comp plan simply to show how are the current properties in the county actually being used at this time. Not what is their comp plan designation, not what is their zoning designation, not whether they were platted, but simply to recognize that at the time of the overlay, this property was being used as a golf course. And therefore, the recreation open space overlay included a depiction of this property. Still residentially zoned, still platted. The surrounding neighborhoods were never promised. We're not a member of their homeowner association. There are no deed restrictions on this property that restrict its use. They were never promised access to this property. They don't own it. It's not in their title policy. They have no provision in their title policy that says that this is going to be a golf course or that they have a view shed right or they have the right to have a vacant piece of land next door to them. In fact, they elected to purchase their home in an adjacent subdivision that is in the same FEMA flood zone that is in the, quote, coastal storm area, and which subdivision looks exactly like this one, except this one will actually comply with modern stormwater regulations and requirements. This one will actually comply with current FEMA construction requirements and standards, and will create open space, and will treat stormwater, and will provide pedestrian connectivity to Millennial Park and access to the Boca Ciega waterfront, will restore the environmental damage that's been caused by the off-site untreated stormwater running out of the adjacent subdivisions, ironically, through this property. So I'm at a loss to understand how, when this property historically had residential density, was never stripped or taken away from it, even when the county commission ultimately changed the plan designation to recreation open space, in the minutes of that county commission meeting, and we have the minutes, the question was raised about the permanency or non-permanency of that change, and the county commission acknowledged on the record, no, the property owner has the right to reapply for the original residential zoning and the original residential entitlements in the future if they wish to apply for those. So this wasn't a never, never, never change. It was simply an acknowledgement that at the time, for the foreseeable future, that property owner elected to use it for a golf course purpose. Well, that person was the property owner, just like Mr. Carpenter now is the property owner. And he never surrendered those rights. And your comp plan says that if he's asking for less than 5 units per acre, that he has the right, per your comp plan policy 1.3.5, to have an appropriate residential subdivision. Now, if there is something about that subdivision design, if there is something about the traffic, if there's something about the hurricane mitigation, if there's something about the stormwater treatment or the pedestrian plan or the location of the open space or the design criteria for the homes or the setbacks for the lots, please, pray tell, engage with us and ask those questions and sit down and discuss those issues so that we can try to come up with a community that everyone can be proud of. But please do not just send us back because of a political directive or the resident opposition. Don't just send back another report that ignores your comp plan, ignores the public benefits of this property. Do the right thing. Exercise the professional, independent judgment that all of you were educated for, trained for, live for, and were employed for, whether the political directive from up high is otherwise or not. If the politicians then want to deny this for some other reason, let them come up with their reasons. But please give us a report that honestly reflects the policies of your comp plan, the merits of this proposal, and if you think you can help us improve the proposal, please tell us how to improve it, and we will work as hard as we possibly can with you to arrive at that better project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tu and team. I appreciate it. At this point in time, I wanted to open it up if there are any clarifying questions or comments from staff with regard to the comments that the applicant's team has provided. We'll certainly give you that opportunity now. At the conclusion of, you'll have another opportunity as well. So as we get through, if there are no comments or responses at this time, then we'll turn it over to Mr. Gehring and let him have his 10 minutes to make his comments. So I'm generally scanning the room. If there's anybody that wants to make a comment, either raise your hand or turn your mic on. But okay, Michael.
Good morning, Michael Schoderbach, Housing Community Development, Land Use and Zoning. A couple of questions on the development master plan.
Yes, sir.
Just, so sheet 3 of 5, your land use framework plan, under the proposed zoning, the table there, proposed uses, you have listed as single-family detached and multifamily listed under that. I didn't see any layouts for any kind of multifamily development on that.
Yeah, the intention is not to do multifamily at this point.
Okay, so that was
So we
just
can
an
take that off,
error.
yeah.
Okay, so wanted to clarify on that one. And on sheet 4 or 5, the open space framework plan, did you ever submit a wetland jurisdictional survey to us regarding the proposed changes to the area of the preservation? I don't remember seeing that.
I don't. Sorry.
Yes, Nicole again. There was a core jurisdictional that was provided to Pinellas County. It's forwarded on.
But not the improvements, though.
You don't establish the improvements, you establish the existing jurisdictional limit. Is that your question?
Yeah, the existing,
It was
the
established.
proposed change to the preservation area, so based on, you know, our current preservation out there, and you're proposing to change the location of it, so based on your wetland study that was done out there, was that provided to us? I didn't see it in the packet here.
As part of the site plan, there was establishment of the proposed additional buffer areas associated with that. So I believe that might be what you're talking about.
But the detail wouldn't be until site plan.
Yeah. The detail was identified as being part of the actual construction plan project that would be, you know, forwarded after this process.
Yeah, we need, if you have the legal description of the jurisdictional survey, for us to map out the proposed preservation.
Again, the
area.
jurisdictional limit was provided to Pinellas County. It
Okay.
was established by Army Corps.
And one other on the open space areas, can you provide us a breakdown? Because under the RPD open space requirements of, so 10% of the site has to be as open space, a third of that has to be in one location, and then 20% of that 10% must be a facility-based recreation, which looks like would be the multi-use trail. If you could give us an acreage breakdown of those.
Yes, I
breakdown
can.
of what the area of the trail, multi-use trail is, the general open space areas, just a breakdown of those on the master plan sheet.
Sure, yeah, I mean, obviously, 35 acres is provided for our open space area, which is over a third of the site. I can break it down further, that's what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's all I had on those, thank you.
Clark, if I can just make a minor comment of note, and it's, I don't mean to belabor this, but there's I believe a typo, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to clarify it. So on the typical lot layouts where you have 4, where they are in lot layout for evacuation zone C, there's a reference to, in the graphic illustration, 60-foot minimum lot widths. The label on both of those still references 40 feet.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure for clarification purposes as those continue through that it is the intent to go with the 60 foot in that designation. So
That's right.
for staff's evaluation and just to make sure we're on the same point.
Yep, that's the intent.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
for that.
Any other staff? Lisa?
Yes, I had actually a couple of comments that I picked up while listening. One was the question about comment number 2. That's in chapter 4 of the coastal management element. It says, over the years, it has been acknowledged that for some areas of the county, particularly along the coastline, the highest and best use for a parcel of land is to maintain it in its natural condition. As development attempts to expand onto more marginal coastline properties, the further destruction of natural coastal resources is a possibility. This goes on and on to explain the importance of rec open space. You also mentioned several sections in here. I think you're referring to the future land use chapter, but You neglected to mention the rec open space chapter of the comprehensive plan. And objective 1.4 in that chapter, the county will protect its open spaces and scenic vistas for their contributions to the quality of life. 143, encourage retention and reestablishment of open vistas with particular emphasis in the coastal areas and lands surrounding parks and environmental lands. As you know, this is adjacent to a park as well. Our floodplain ordinance further prohibits development in anything deemed as preservation in the future land use. 1.5 objective recognizes limited open space and the need to preserve it. To your comment about not allowing any development in the coastal storm area, that's not for something that actually has density on it. This property the plat was vacated a quarter of a century ago. So this doesn't have density for that.
So what does policy 1.3.5 mean, please?
That is
Tell me what that means.
That would be a conflict that we need to address as the county in our comprehensive plan, but you're hanging your hat on the fact that there's residential around it and one misstatement in a comprehensive plan, but you haven't looked at the overall goals of the comprehensive plan and all of the chapters within it.
And do you resolve conflicts in the comprehensive plan which the county wrote? Do you resolve those in favor of the county or in favor of the property owner and the applicant?
That would have to go to the planning department and director for them to look at the whole entire plan. I mean, you have to look at this holistically, and that's one small thing that is outstanding from what the rest of the entire plan states.
Well, we assert that we have the right under 1.3.5, which is a policy, unlike the other provisions that you're reading as a narrative description. I believe the stated policy always trumps over a narrative statement in a comprehensive plan, but you can confer with your county attorney about that.
I absolutely will, but there are several policies, and you are talking about one policy versus many, many policies. This is also not political. We're not ignoring the comprehensive plan, nor its benefit to our constituents. We're actually following the vision of the plan here.
All right, since you said it's not political, I'm going to give you a little history. When we came in for the pre-app, we were assured by senior management that based on the concepts we discussed and the issues we're willing to address, that this was supportable. The only reason it's not being supported is a directive from senior management to not support it. That's our good faith belief.
I have not heard any such thing. So I feel that the rest of the comprehensive plan outweighs the couple of items that you've pointed out, and I'll leave it at that.
Can you give me the policy numbers, not objectives and not narratives? Can you give me the policy numbers that contradict policy 1.3.5?
1.4, 1.4.3, 1.5.
Slow down.
1.4.
Okay.
1.4.3, 1.5, all in the recreational open space chapter, which you neglected to mention.
And you contend those are in conflict with 1.3.5?
I contend that the rest of 1.3 is that 1.3.5 is in conflict with the other items in 1.3, the other policies, and the overall objective.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Not seeing any other staff members requesting the opportunity to clarify questions at this point in time, then Mr. Gehring, I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak on, as we had indicated, setting up this meeting, that you'll have 10 minutes to make your comments, and then we may have some clarification or questions for you after that as well. So, if you would go ahead and unmute yourself so that we can hear you, and then please proceed.
Thank you, Blake. Richard Gehring. I'm a planner rep to the Save the Tides group, working with attorney Bill Kimpton. We've been active in this for 9 years, which is a considerable amount of time, through various activities that the neighborhood has attempted to preserve its position in the land use element of the Pinellas County Comprehensive Plan. I have submitted a document to you. There's like 6 pages of my comments that I'm just going to highlight here because I'm asking, really why we're here. We know we want to expand the understanding of the staff before they do their deliberation. We want to frame the policy items that are guiding this recommendation. We want to be clear on the Restoration Bay application is built on a kind of inconsistency and fact envelope that's pretty vacant of the whole plan policy structure, as the staff member just outlined in her comments. And it has a framework in this resubmittal that is, I think, like she just mentioned, somewhat of a cherry picking of policy structures to look for a way to say, oh, you're inconsistent. And we want to clearly recognize that there is a comprehensive plan here in which the requested action should be to sustain the recommendations of last April in the action that went forward to the LPA, but the LPA was not held. So I'm just going to hit these points without going into great detail because I think you have most of them in writing. But the plan is the county adopted plan for the community and the county-wide unincorporated area. Florida law in 163 does protect citizens as well as property owners to rely on the plan. There is a unincorporated area, which is Sector 9 of the Seminole area, this is a key component of. And there's a change here requesting a piece of land that has for its entire life, its entire history, been open space in some form, either as pasture or as a golf course. And it is now looking to change in an entirely different setting. And you have to look at, for Joel, who I've known for years, I've been in this activity for 45 years, is sort of hinging on a plat that was actually filed 12 years after Pinellas County was created. In 1926, it was the beginning of the end of the boom. Land did not go over, development did not go over into that area. And then it was vacated by the owner's request. So there is no magic 273 units. You can scratch under the dirt and find it. It's not there. We outlined and reinforced the staff comments that the PPC or the Forward Pinellas Group has a very clear set of 7 policies that we think are very applicable here that call for compatibility preservation, to weigh heavily the conditions of the area and the natural features, and to discourage the conversion of recreation open space and preservation land to other designations, and discourage the conversion of golf courses. These are very specific wording. And they give a framework in a setting that Mr. Tu wants us to all be quasi-judicial and in a zoning context when we are in a comprehensive plan land use legislative context. And that context is where you can fairly debatable look at the benefit to the whole community, the overall policy framework, the entire comprehensive plan, and not cherry pick, oh, look, here on this policy here, there's some 5 units that we think we have an inherent right to. The Restoration Bay application, goes through, and their supplemental fact is just a whole series of, we don't like these policy positions that the staff has taken. You ignore the comprehensive nature of the staff comments, and there's a backup between the 2 components because this denial recommendation in April was following a denial recommendations in 2014 for a Taylor Morrison project that was 103 units less than their application here. There's a change of conditions. There's a very high importance of open space to the county. Point to the element you mentioned, which was the Bay Point Golf Course, but also to a Dunedin effort with the county to save 50 acres to match to 100 acres of swift mud land, and to make a 100-acre park in North County. All of these elements are important to the quality of life of not only this neighborhood, but of Pinellas County. So we see a situation where there is not a strong rationale in the presentation for the density for the plan. It's the same plan recycled from the Taylor Morrison activity and the big figure 8. You're moving around elements and calling them to be good faith efforts to get towards something that meets all this creativity. But it is really not designed to accommodate the current conditions or the comp plan. So on balance, this statement you make that it's unfair and erroneous to contend that the balance of the public benefit does not outweigh the overall impacts of the development, I think it's very, very consistent to weigh the impacts of the development. So this component of history, going back almost 100 years to the date of the plat, the elements that the site has predominantly been vacant its entire existence, that the comp plan flume was set aside. It's been 49 years as a golf course. It's had 46 years of designation for resignation open space. It has consistency, and in 1985, if you review that zoning, while you stress the fact that it could be changed, it was rezoned to 0.5 or 1 unit per 2 acres. The land use amendment requests have been consistently denied, and the planning, we wrote a planning letter to then Director Arrington. We've been through 3 planning directors on this application. We outlined all the principles of the planning to stay element to make the point that you have to look at all of the criteria of the plan that was adopted after 2000 to deal with a county that was at build out, that had almost 1 million population, condition that where maintaining the character and quality of neighborhoods was a major strategic policy component of the county. So when you look at these components, while you point out a particular policy issue, I would refer you to the pages in the 20s of the staff recommendation for denial, where they list 34 policies of the comp plan that are inconsistent with this application. They then proceed to point out 5 policies which they consider consistent. You have to weigh that entire framework in looking at this, not just pick that one phrase in the coastal management issues, which I would say you could argue if you had this, if you had residential zoning, if you had the criteria that got you to start at that point, you could apply that policy. But you have legislatively 0 units in the recreation open space, and that is the issue you must pursue. So application process has been fairly clear on this. The element of destruction of the area, I've never heard an answer to the question of how you deal with a V14 and a foot above grade and a 15-foot fill potential on how much of the site that would have a significant impact. And I also have never seen anything that ever defined the kind of floodplain displacement, requirement that if you are putting dirt into the floodplain, you are responsible to compensate for it. So where is there any compensation in this framework, unless the entire project is going to be on stilts? We think that the actions that are in front of us are such that you should sustain the original recommendation unless there's some major new benefit to be outlined here. The crux of the staff position was that the benefits did not outweigh the recreation open space designation. The land modifications that would be necessary to do this impact not only the neighborhood to the east, but a major county park, Millennial Park, to the west. And the times have changed, and we are in a period now where we are putting forth policies of sustainability, and policies of sustainability call us to be much more responsible and not introduce 273 units, which could be 500 or plus citizens to be attracted to live in an area that's subject to hurricane damage and risk. That good public policy is not go and encourage that because you can find a clause that says there's some particular practice and policy to get there. So I think that the responsible approach that the staff has been taking on this property in these applications requires them to stay consistent with it and to proceed with a recommendation that is similar to the one they issued in April. I've added some elements to this, which are the original zoning activity, the comp plan denial for Taylor Morrison, the comp plan denial in April, and I added a letter to Planning Director Arrington on the principles of planning to stay. So those are the key elements the neighborhood's concerned with. That's my 10 minutes and 2 seconds. I'm sorry. Back to you, Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Gearing. I appreciate it. All right. At this time, again, we'll open it up if there are any comments or questions, clarification needed by staff. This is the opportunity to do that either of Mr. Gearing or of the applicants. And if I don't see any, Joe, did you want to? Please.
Thank you, Blake. Hi, good morning. My name is Joe Graham. I'm with Pinellas County Utilities. I supervise the Engineering Technical Services section, and I am a professional engineer licensed in the state of Florida. I just want to discuss really quickly some of your considerations that I want you to have at the outset before we get too far along with regards to water and sewer reclaimed water service provision. Very quickly, as far as water goes, at this point, given what we have, there's not a lot of problems that we've identified for the site. We would want to see it looped for water quality considerations. You've got 2 points of connection. We recommend that you use them. I can't speak at this time as to whether or not reclaimed water service would be available to the residents if this project goes forward. So that would be a conversation for later, but it's possible that the answer to that would be no. But finally, I want to stress on the sewer side, there are significant considerations that need to be addressed at the outset if this project is to move forward. Basically, you've already said in your comments that you would be proposing one lift station. At this time, we don't look to allow private lift stations to be constructed in the county, so any lift station that you propose on site would be designed and constructed in accordance with Pinellas County standard utilities and specifications, and it would then become Pinellas County's property to own and maintain in perpetuity. That's just to maintain a quality of life and for our residents and make sure that those assets are being maintained in the future correctly. One of the bigger problems also is that's just on site. That's within the boundaries of that site. We need to then look beyond that site to the impacts that the significant amount of sewer flow from this site would generate. So not only would we be talking about our average flows, but also these peaking flows, the flows that come from those houses when everybody's awake, when everybody's using them. And once again, based on the information that we have now, it is a certainty that you would be upgrading one or more off-site lift stations. Once again, to the standards and specifications of Pinellas County Utilities. So we would be going upstream one lift station because this would be generating a lot of flow. We would be talking about pumps, wet wells, basically entire lift station rehabilitations off-site that would be the responsibility of the developer if this project goes forward. I wanted to make sure you had that information at the outset so that when you're designing, you're not just looking at those costs that would be incurring within the property boundary, but also looking to the impacts that this would have on the greater county infrastructure. With that, I just wanted to put that in front of you now, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
No questions. We're aware of those issues and appreciate you bringing them up.
Thanks. And so we've identified that you have one of two different pump stations to connect to. So if depending on your design, you might be upgrading both of those off-site pump stations. So, and those
Understood.
are significant costs. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, I'm scanning the room to see if there are any other questions. It doesn't look like there appear to be any at this time. So what I'll do is, Mr. Tu, did you have any final comments or remarks that you'd like to make?
Yes, Mr. Lyon, just 3 or 4 points in response to Mr. Gehring's presentation. He would be disappointed if I didn't have a couple. First of all, the reference Mr. Gehring made to us affecting the character and quality of neighborhoods. As I stated from the outset, this proposed subdivision is exactly the same as the surrounding neighborhoods. I don't know what it is about the character of the neighborhood that we're not consistent with. In fact, the prior staff report found, as a matter of fact, that our proposal was entirely consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. I think what he's saying is he's trying to get you to believe or to think that when those people purchased in a platted suburban subdivision, that they somehow acquired property rights to vacant land that's not in their subdivision, was never in their subdivision, is not on their title policy, not on their deed, not in their deed restrictions, and they were never promised any access to or permanent location of that use on that adjacent property. That would be like you saying that if you buy a home next to a cow pasture, that you are forever entitled to have that be a cow pasture. That's not how it works. That's not the law. That's not how planning principles are applied. Mr. Gehring also made the statement trying to convince you that policy 1.3.5 doesn't mean what it clearly says. He conceded that, quote, if you, meaning me, if we had a residential zoning, then we could argue for that density of 5 units per acre. But he claims we don't have residential zoning. That's false. We absolutely have RA zoning, which entitles us, as he referenced, to 1 unit for every 2 acres. We can put 48, 49 residential units on this property. We have the zoning for it right now. So using his argument, we do have a residential zoning entitlement today. We have 96 acres, I think, so we're entitled to 1 for every 2 acres. So we have an entitlement to 48 units. Under his logic, we therefore, because we have a residential entitlement, we have the right to apply policy 1.3.5 and have up to 5 units an acre. We've only asked for 3. He also mentioned, and this is my concluding point, he made reference to the 2 county acquisitions. He just referred to the Douglas Estate in Dunedin, and of course, as you know, the county's participating in that purchase to keep it from being developed. He also referred to Bay Point, which we mentioned. And here's my concern. I think the opposition we're getting from the county is that the county probably would prefer, in a perfect world, to purchase this property as a park, possibly add it to Millennium Park, and put it to public use. Here's the problem with that. If you want to buy it, you need to offer to buy it. You don't need to create reasons that we don't think are grounded in your comp plan or in fact to try to prevent it from getting a development approval just to drive down the price or to increase bargaining leverage so that the county can ultimately acquire it. I, in good faith, believe that's what's going on here based upon the county's ongoing practice of trying to stop development and redevelopment of golf courses and other open space in order to apply them. If you want to take a private property for a public purpose, then do it the way the Constitution says. Either negotiate to purchase it or condemn it and let somebody else decide what the value is. Do not arbitrarily use land use policies to try to leverage that acquisition or to beat down the value of that property. And that's my concern. And that's where I believe this is headed one day. And that's not appropriate. And the mere fact that Mr. Gehring brings up the Douglas property and Bay Point tells you, and you know from all the postings from the Save the Tides group, you know very much that they're lobbying your commission to acquire this property for public purpose. You also know you don't presently have the money to do it. Okay? That's just the fact. It's no secret. It's in the newspaper. You barely had the money to help with the Douglas estate. So don't use this. If the right answer here is to give development entitlements, give development entitlements. If and when the county decides that it is a matter of sufficient public purpose to the overall citizens of Pinellas County to acquire the property, then pick up the telephone, call us, and discuss purchase of the property. But don't browbeat us and beat us down on a land use request that is entirely appropriate under your comp plan for some ulterior purpose. The city of St. Pete, as I believe you know, is taking a very different position on the coastal storm area, contrary to the policies that were being argued by staff in response to policy 1.3.5. St. Petersburg has made a policy decision, and they have at least as much, if not more, coastal area than unincorporated Pinellas down here in South County. They are going to allow development and redevelopment. They instead have focused their goals on the manner of construction, the type of construction, the mitigation for construction and redevelopment. I urge staff to at least read the St. Petersburg directive, confer with the St. Petersburg planning staff. I'm not saying they're right or you're right, but they are taking a very different path on this same subject. and they would not be opposing this redevelopment or repurposing. They would instead be talking to us about the design issues and the construction issues and the manner of construction and the hurricane mitigation. So we urge you to please rethink your position. I'm not at all optimistic that you will, but I urge you to. I hope you do. And we will stand ready, willing, and able to meet with you at any time about the development agreement. Mr. Sadowski, if someone decides they're willing to discuss that, we're here. You know my number and my email, and we're happy to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments, and thank you all for attending, both those of you that are here in person and those that are streaming online. We do appreciate your interest and your continued contributions in this matter. What we're going to do at this point, just for a point of clarification, is we're going to conclude today's Development Review Committee meeting. As those of you who participated last year in this assuredly know, that we will be deliberating among staff and creating a consolidated staff recommendation that will then be, once prepared, will be made available to the general public in advance of the local planning agency meeting. Right now, that meeting is scheduled for, if memory serves me correctly, April 6th. And it will be also held in this room. That meeting, a little bit different than today's meeting, is this is a public meeting. That meeting will be a public hearing. So those that wish to have the opportunity to make personal comments will have the opportunity to do so. As you can appreciate, those opportunities can both be here in person, again, socially distant, of course, or there will be an opportunity to participate through the Zoom link if you wish to stay in the privacy of your own home or office to do so. So we'll make sure that that information is made available to the general public for those who wish to participate. And again, wanted to thank you all for being here or participating online. And again, thank you for your presentations. That will conclude this morning's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.